The question that shook the bar. The space station floated silently above the gas planet, glowing like a tiny star in the black sky. Inside, it was anything but quiet. Captain Leo Kane walked into the main bar, boots heavy, jacket dusty, and eyes tired from a long mission. The place was filled with sounds, laughing aliens, clinking glasses, and the low hum of alien music. He just wanted a drink, and maybe a moment to forget about the galaxy's problems. "Leo," a voice called. It was Max, his second in command, waving from a corner booth. Their crew was already halfway through a bottle of synth whiskey. Leo sat down. "What's the occasion?" "You survived another pirate ambush," Max grinned. "That's worth drinking to." The crew laughed. It was true. Leo had just returned from a dangerous cargo run through the Red Void, a place no sane captain flew through. But he did, and he made it out. As Leo lifted his glass, the room suddenly fell quiet. Not completely, but enough that he noticed. He followed the silence and saw her. She walked into the bar like a shadow made of silver light. She wasn't human. Tall, elegant, with deep blue skin and silver-white hair flowing like smoke. Her eyes glowed softly, metallic and alive, like they could see through time. "Who is that?" Leo whispered. Max grinned. "No idea. She showed up yesterday. Some say she's from the Orient Vale. Others think she's a royal spy." "She's not wearing any faction symbol," Leo said, narrowing his eyes. "That's the weird part," Max said. "She talks to no one. Drinks alone. Doesn't even blink." The alien woman sat at the bar, alone, holding a clear drink that shimmered like starlight. "Go talk to her," Max said, nudging Leo. Leo laughed. "Talk to her? She looks like she eats star captains for breakfast. Come on, Kane. You're the man who flew through the Red Void. You scared off space pirates. And now you're scared of talking to a pretty alien." The crew joined in. "Do it, Captain. What's the worst that could happen?" Leo sighed, finished his drink, and stood up. "All right. You want a show. Watch and learn." He walked slowly toward her, trying to look casual but respectful. The room's eyes followed him. Even the bartender stopped wiping glasses. The alien woman didn't look up. Leo stood next to her at the bar. "Is this seat taken?" She didn't answer, just looked at him with those silver eyes, a small tilt of her head, like a predator watching a curious animal. Leo cleared his throat. "I've seen a lot of strange things in this galaxy," he said, "but none quite like you." Still no answer. "I'm Leo Kane, captain of the ship Firelight. You don't have to talk, but it'd be nice to know your name." A pause. Then softly, she said, "Varela." Her voice was smooth, calm, but not cold, like music in a dark forest. Leo smiled. "Well, Varela, since I've had a rough week flying through death zones and outrunning pirates, I was thinking maybe, just maybe, you'd like to get a drink with me. Or dinner. You know, a date." Silence. Then laughter, from the crew, from the bar, even from a few aliens who didn't speak Galactic Standard. The idea of a human asking her out was insane. But Varela didn't laugh. She stared at him, eyes unblinking. Then she did something no one expected. She said, "Yes." The bar went silent again. You could hear the engines humming. Leo blinked. "Wait, what?" "Yes," she said again. "I accept your offer." People began whispering. Max nearly choked on his drink. Leo scratched his head. "You're serious?" "I do not joke," Varela replied. "But you must understand, a date with me is not what you think. If we begin, it cannot end the way you expect." Leo raised an eyebrow. "What does that mean?" She reached into her cloak and placed a small glowing cube on the bar. It pulsed gently, blue, then white, then blue again. "You asked," she said. "Now you are part of something much larger." The cube floated into the air, spinning. Symbols appeared. Not from any known language. A few aliens near the bar backed away slowly. Leo looked at the cube, then back at her. "What is this?" Virella stood up, taller than Leo, and said one last thing before turning to leave. This was not a meeting. It was a beginning. She walked out of the bar, leaving the cube floating in front of him. Leo didn't know it yet, but that one question, asked half as a joke, had just set off a chain of events that would shake the galaxy. And he had no idea what was coming next. First contact, with a catch. He thought it was just a date, but she had other plans, plans written in the stars long before he was born. The space station was never truly dark, but now, something felt off. Captain Leo Kane sat alone in his quarters, staring at the small glowing cube Virella had left on the bar. It hovered silently above his table, turning slowly in the air. Symbols glowed along its sides, symbols no one in the entire station database could translate. He had tried, and failed. Twice. Max had begged him to leave it alone. "This is above our pay grade," he had said. "You flirted with a mystery. Now you've got one floating in your cabin. Maybe it's time to step away." But Leo couldn't stop thinking about her. Virella. The way she had looked at him, not like a stranger, but like she already knew him. Then the memory hit him again. Her words, "This is not what you think. If we begin, it cannot end the way you expect." He reached out and tapped the cube. It pulsed once, blue light spreading like water across the room. And then, the floor disappeared, or at least it felt like it. In a flash of bright light, Leo was no longer in his quarters. He stood in a giant silver hall, high above ground, with walls that shimmered like liquid metal. He blinked, looked around. No door, no ceiling he could see, no sky, just an endless silver horizon. And her. Virella stood at the far end of the room, dressed in a dark cloak, her silver eyes glowing stronger now. "Welcome, Leo Kane," she said. "You have crossed the veil." Leo stepped forward. "This isn't real. I'm dreaming." "No," she said. "This is a pocket dimension. A message. Only you can see this." Leo laughed nervously. "Great. So now I'm getting secret alien visions." "Not visions," she said. "A test." The silver floor beneath them began to shift. Shapes appeared, ghostly figures of ancient battles. Armies of humans standing beside alien species, giant machines falling from the sky, worlds burning, worlds rebuilding. "This," Virella said softly, "is what your people do not remember." Leo turned to her. "What are you talking about?" "Humans are not new to the stars," she said. "You were once everywhere. You were warriors, builders, protectors." "That's not in our history books," Leo said. "No," Virella nodded. "Because someone, erased it." Leo stared at the moving images. "And this has what to do with me." She stepped closer. "Your question was not a joke. It was a trigger. I was sent to find someone worthy. Someone who would ask, not take. Someone who sees a stranger and offers kindness. You're telling me all this started because I asked you out on a date?" "Yes," she said. "And because I said yes." The vision ends. The cube blinked, and Leo was back in his room, sweating, heart pounding. The cube dropped into his hand, now cold and lifeless. But he wasn't alone. Virella stood near the door. "You? How did you get in here?" She ignored the question. "I gave you a message only you could receive. That cube cannot be read by machines or governments. It's for you alone." Leo sat down slowly. "Okay. I'm in. I want answers. Who are you really?" "I am Virella of the Vayari. We do not date. We bond for life. We never bond with outsiders. Until now." Leo's eyes widened. "You're saying this date is more like a galactic marriage proposal." "Not exactly," she said, "but close enough." She walked toward the window, staring out at the stars. "Something is coming. A darkness older than war. We can't stop it alone. But I believe you, and your kind still have what it takes. Leo stood beside her. Why me? Why humans? She looked at him, and this time there was emotion in her voice. Because your people still hope. Even after all the war, the mistakes, the loss. Humans keep loving, keep trusting. That makes you dangerous to the wrong kind of power. Suddenly, a loud alarm echoed through the station. Red alert. Unidentified. Ship AP Poroching. Virella turned to Leo. They found us. We must leave. Now. Leo's eyes narrowed. Who found us? She didn't answer. Instead, she grabbed his hand, and in her palm, a small black device lit up. The wall of his room twisted, like paper folding in on itself, until it became a glowing portal. Leo stared into it. He had no idea what was on the other side. But he had already stepped into something big. Bigger than love. Bigger than war. Maybe even bigger than humanity. He looked at her. She squeezed his hand. He stepped through the portal, and everything changed. The alien truth. He woke up on a strange world, surrounded by enemies, and the woman he thought he could trust. But what she told him next changed everything he believed about humanity. Leo Kane gasped as his eyes opened. The first thing he noticed was the sky, purple, and filled with slow-moving rings of light that spun like giant wheels above him. The air was thin but breathable. The grass under him was black. Strange trees grew nearby, their roots glowing softly in the soil. He sat up slowly. Where was he? The last thing he remembered was Virella opening the portal in his room. They had stepped through together, and now she stood a few feet away, staring at him silently. Where are we? Leo asked, his voice hoarse. My home, Virella said. The inner lands of Vayer Prime. He looked around. Alien birds flew through the sky, their wings long and sharp like knives. In the distance, towers rose from the land, curved in silver, humming with energy. This place looked peaceful, but the silence was heavy, as if something terrible had happened, or was about to happen. Leo stood up, brushing dust from his jacket. You didn't say the portal would knock me out. It wasn't the portal, she said. You passed out because your mind wasn't ready. For what? She didn't answer. Instead, a deep sound echoed through the valley. A low hum, like a heartbeat, metallic and alive. Leo turned. A group of tall, armored beings walked toward them. They all looked like Virella, but their eyes were colder. No emotion, no curiosity, just judgment. The tallest one stepped forward. You brought him here. Yes, Virella said. He is human. The leader said sharply. You know the law. He is more than human, Virella replied. He asked. He did not take. He is the first in 1,000 years. Leo felt the weight of every word but understood very little. Someone want to explain. The leader pointed at him. You are under arrest for violation of the ancient accord. No human shall step foot on Vayer soil. Leo laughed nervously. You've got to be kidding. No one laughed. They seized him. A prison unlike any other. Leo was dragged into a tall glass-like building that wasn't built. It looked grown, like a living tree made of light. Inside was a glowing chamber where he was placed alone, surrounded by transparent walls and buzzing energy. Virella stood on the other side. He looked at her, betrayed. You brought me here to get me locked up. I had no choice, she said softly. The laws are ancient, but they will hear you. There will be a trial. A trial? For what? For asking you on a date. No, she said. For being what you are. Leo stepped back. Okay, I've had enough of riddles. I want the truth. Why does your kind hate humans so much? What are you all so afraid of? Virella looked down. Then she pressed her hand to the glass, and it faded into a window, showing a massive wall of carvings outside, stretching hundreds of feet into the sky. "This is the truth wall," she said. "Our oldest history, the part we do not speak of." Leo stared at the images. Humans, not in chains or running, but leading. Side by side with the Vayari, with other alien races, in peace, in war, in victory. "We fought together once," she said. "Long ago, your kind and mine were allies. But then, the great silence came. Human worlds vanished. Your empires fell. Your stories turned to myth. And when the galaxy tried to rebuild, humans were forgotten." Leo stared in shock. "You're saying humans used to rule this part of the galaxy?" "Not rule," Varela said. "Protect. A secret buried for centuries." She explained everything. Thousands of years ago, humans had reached the stars first, far before the Vayari or any other species. They didn't conquer. They united. They created a peace between worlds that lasted for centuries. But then, something changed. A great enemy rose. The Eaters of Suns, a species so powerful and dark, they consumed stars to survive. The humans fought back, and to protect the others, they sacrificed everything. They burned their own star maps, destroyed their advanced tech. They made sure no one would find Earth again, so the enemy could not follow. And it worked, Varela said. The Eaters were pushed into the dark, forgotten. But so were the humans. History became legend, and eventually, a lie. Leo was speechless. Your people returned to Earth and forgot everything. Your memory reset, but your instincts remained. Leo whispered, "That's why I felt like I was meant for more." "Yes," she said, "that's why the cube responded to you. That's why I said yes." The trial begins. Suddenly, the floor beneath him glowed. The walls vanished. He was now in a massive round arena, thousands of Vayari seated in silence, floating judges above them. Leo stood in the center. The leader spoke. "State your name and purpose." Leo took a breath. His heart raced. He looked around at all the alien faces, waiting to judge him, waiting to exile or punish. He spoke loudly. "My name is Captain Leo Kane. I came here not as a threat, but as a man who asked a simple question. And I got a very complicated answer." The crowd murmured. "I didn't know your history. I didn't know your rules. But I do know this. If humans once stood by your side, maybe it's time we do it again. Not because of the past, but because of the future." Varela stood from her seat. "I vouch for him," she said. "He is not like the others. He is the key." The council went silent. The judgment would come soon. But in that moment, Leo Kane had done the impossible. He made the galaxy listen. Trial of the outsider. He was just a man from Earth. Now he stood on trial, not just for himself, but for all of humanity. The sky above the Vayari High Court shimmered with light. From space, Vayar Prime looked peaceful, rivers of glowing green light, endless floating gardens, towers of metal and crystal. But inside the judgment arena, peace was only a mask. Tension ran like electricity in the air. Thousands of Vayari had gathered in silence. Floating platforms circled the courtroom, each filled with delegates from distant star systems, watchers, spies, scholars. For the first time in 900 years, a human stood in the trial ring. Captain Leo Kane. Unarmed, outnumbered, but not afraid. He stared up at the tall, masked judges, known only as the Eternals. Their long silver robes floated as if gravity didn't touch them. They spoke in one voice, echoed through every mind in the chamber. "You have entered sacred soil. You were not invited. You carry the blood of a forgotten people. Do you deny this?" Leo stood straight. "I don't deny it. I am human, and I'm proud of that." Whispers spread through the arena like wind through dry leaves. The Eternals continued. "Then you know your kind is forbidden. The last humans brought war. Their silence brought death. Their betrayal cost us the stars. Leo clenched his fists. Then maybe it's time you hear the other side of the story. The voice of humanity. They let him speak. Not because they respected him, but because they were curious. Leo looked around. I come from a world you've forgotten. We call it Earth. We grow up under one sun, one moon. We don't have cities that float or machines that read minds. But we have something else, something your ancient laws forgot. He paused. We care. Some Vayari laughed. Others looked down, unsure. Leo raised his voice. We fall. We break. We mess things up. But we don't stop. We love. We protect. We fight for strangers. And yes, sometimes we destroy things. But we also rebuild them. Better. He turned toward the highest platform, where Varela stood silently. She said I was the first human in 1,000 years to ask without demanding. To reach out without taking. That's not weakness. That's strength. He pointed at the crowd. Maybe you forgot what hope looks like. But I haven't. Varela's testimony. Then it was Varela's turn. She stepped into the ring, her cloak flowing behind her. I was chosen as a watcher, she said, to study the new Earth, to observe and report. I was told humans were dangerous, primitive. I believed it, until I met Leo Kane. Gasps echoed across the crowd. He treated me like a person, not a tool, not a target. He asked me to dinner, knowing nothing about who I was or what I could do. That question was not a joke. It was a sign, the same kind of sign we used to believe in. Her voice grew strong. I saw kindness in him, curiosity, honor. We call ourselves advanced, but we've lost the simple courage to trust. He hasn't. She stepped back beside Leo. I stand with the outsider. The judgment. The arena dimmed. The Eternals whispered among themselves. For the first time, there was disagreement. Some wanted to banish him. Others saw potential. The decision was unclear. Then the leader floated forward. You are no longer an individual. Your presence has forced us to reopen history. The blood of Earth runs in you. But the heart, we must test. The arena floor split open. From below, a massive structure rose. Half machine, half organic. It looked like a chair, but it pulsed like a heart. Lines of energy ran across its frame. This is the memory throne, said Varela, her voice suddenly filled with fear. If you sit in it, it will show the truth of your bloodline, your past, your deepest self. Leo looked at her. What if I fail? She touched his arm. Then they will erase you, your body, your memories, as if you never existed. He stared at the throne. Then he stepped forward. The truth revealed. The moment he sat down, the entire room shook. Light exploded from the throne. Leo's body stiffened. His eyes went wide. He saw visions, not dreams, but memories, burned into his DNA. He saw humans in space armor, leading fleets. He saw humans teaching peace to alien children. He saw the last war, fire raining from the sky, Earth hidden behind a false star map. The final message. We will return when the galaxy remembers what it means to be brave. Tears ran down his face. The throne pulsed once, then fell silent. The judges leaned forward. He is who he says. The blood of the ancients flows in him. The aftermath. They didn't free him, but they didn't erase him either. Instead, they gave him a choice. Return to Earth and keep the truth secret forever. Prove himself. Go on a mission only the ancients once survived. A journey into a forbidden zone of the galaxy known as the Ash Corridor. Leo looked at Varela. She whispered, if you go, I'll go with you. He turned to the court. I'll take the mission. Not for me. For humanity. For all of you. And so, with the galaxy watching, the outsider became something else. The first human ambassador in 1,000 years. And maybe, humanity's last hope. The forbidden mission. He passed the trial. Now he must survive the journey through a dead zone of space where entire civilizations vanished. And something is still waiting. The stars looked wrong. That was the first thing Leo Kane noticed. He stood on the observation deck of the Starpath, a sleek Vayari scout vessel unlike anything he had ever flown. Its walls moved like liquid. Its controls responded to thought. But none of that calmed him. Because ahead of the ship was the Ash Corridor, a region of space blacker than night, without light, sound, or return signals. It had no planets, no stations, no survivors, just silence. And silence in space was rarely empty. Virella stood beside him, calm as ever, her silver eyes watching the darkness ahead. She wore a battle cloak now, light armor woven with living metal. "You don't have to come," Leo said quietly. "I do," she replied, "because what's out there knows your name now." Leo looked at her. "What does that mean?" She didn't answer. Not yet. Mission of Shadows. They weren't alone on the ship. The Vayari High Council had sent a watcher team with them, 4 soldiers and 1 AI navigator. None of them trusted Leo, and they made that clear. "This human is a risk," said Commander Thalen, a tall Vayari with a voice like broken glass. "He may be ancient-blooded, but he is still unpredictable. He's also the only reason you're still breathing." Virella replied. That shut Thalen up, for now. Their mission was simple, on paper. Enter the Ash Corridor. Reach the location marked in the memory throne. Retrieve the relic left behind by the ancients. Return alive. But no one had returned from the corridor in over 800 years. The last ship that entered was found drifting decades later, with the crew turned to stone. Crossing the boundary, the ship passed the last known beacon, a spinning satellite from a dead empire. Then everything changed. The stars vanished. The universe outside turned to black dust. Even time felt slower. The engines began to strain. Leo could feel something pressing against his chest, like space itself didn't want them there. Suddenly, the AI spoke. "Warning. Unknown frequency detected. Pattern matches no known race. Language. Pre-collapse code." Thalen frowned. "What kind of language is that?" Leo stepped forward. "Play it." The ship's speakers crackled. And then something began to speak. Not a voice. A scream. Long, low, broken. Not made of sound, but of memory. As if the stars themselves remembered pain. Virella whispered, "It's them." Leo looked at her. "The Eaters of Suns." She nodded. "The graveyard planet." After hours of silent drifting, a shape appeared in the void. A planet, or what was left of one. Broken in half, bleeding lava and light into space. Orbiting it were ruins of ships, cities, and bones the size of skyscrapers. The ship hovered over the surface. "This is the place," Leo said, holding the small cube the memory throne had fused into his hand. It glowed hot. They descended. Leo and Virella stepped onto the dead world, followed by Thalen's team. The air was toxic, the sky red with storm clouds. Strange crystals poked from the ground, humming with a quiet energy. And then they saw it. A tower, not made of metal, but grown from stone and light. It pulsed slowly, like it was alive. Words were carved into the surface. Leo read them out loud. "Here sleeps the flame of Terra. Speak the vow, and the light shall rise again." He looked at Virella. "What vow?" She shook her head. "No one knows. The ancients kept it secret." Suddenly, the ground beneath them cracked. An explosion threw them into the air. The enemy revealed. From beneath the broken crust, they came. Shadows, tall, thin, made of black mist and glowing red eyes. They didn't walk. They floated, silent, watching. One touched Thalen's soldier. He dropped instantly, flesh turning to ash, bones turning to dust. "Back to the ship," Thalen shouted. Leo didn't move. The cube in his hand blazed white. And suddenly, the shadows stopped. They looked at him, not with hate, with recognition. One of them spoke. "You are late." The flame of Terra. The tower opened like a blooming flower. Inside was a small room with a single chair and a glowing white orb above it. The cube in Leo's hand floated upward and fused into the orb. A hologram flickered to life. It was a human, an old man in battle armor. His eyes tired but sharp. "If you're seeing this, Earth has been forgotten. And you, child of Terra, have returned to the ashes." The message revealed the truth. The ancients knew the Eaters of Suns would return. They left behind a weapon, not of war, but of memory, a flare of truth, able to awaken the sleeping past in human blood, to rebuild what was lost. Leo was the key. But the flare could only be used once. If he used it now, it would warn Earth. If he waited, it could awaken an army of hidden ancients across the galaxy. A choice had to be made. The impossible decision. Varela stepped forward. "You can bring your world back, or bring back the others." Leo stared at the orb. He thought of Earth. He thought of the galaxy. He thought of her. Then he made his choice. He was never just human. The stars called him back. The relics answered his voice. And now, the galaxy would remember the truth. He was never just a man. The stars had changed. From the bridge of the starpath, Leo Kane watched them flicker, one by one, like candles being lit after centuries of darkness. His hand still tingled with energy from the flare he had released on the dead planet. The light had spread across space like a silent signal, reaching places no map had ever shown. "Look," Varela whispered beside him. Dozens of lights had appeared on the navigation display, ancient human signals, dormant for over 1,000 years, buried deep in forgotten corners of the galaxy. Now awake. Now answering. Leo didn't speak. He couldn't. His chest felt heavy. Not with fear, with purpose. "I don't think I was ever meant to go back," he finally said. "No," Varela replied gently, "because you were never truly from there." Echoes in the blood. The ship returned to Vaor Prime under strict escort. Thalen and his watchers were silent, no longer mocking or cold. They had seen the tower. They had heard the voice of the last ancient commander. And they had seen Leo survive the shadows where others died. The Eternals awaited him in the High Hall. But this time, they stood. Not in judgment. In respect. "You have done what we could not," the lead Eternal said. "You woke the flame. You walked into death and returned with truth. For that, we honor you." Leo stood before them, tired but firm. "I didn't do it alone." He looked at Varela. She nodded once, eyes calm, glowing with quiet pride. Another Eternal stepped forward, holding a silver object, a metal gauntlet, shaped to fit a human arm. Ancient runes lit across it. "This was forged in the First Age," he said. "It was made for a Terra Prime Guardian. It has not opened for anyone in 1,000 years." He handed it to Leo. The moment it touched his skin, the gauntlet uncurled like a living creature, wrapped around his forearm, and locked into place with a soft hiss. Symbols blazed white. Everyone stepped back. The Eternals whispered, "He is marked." Memories unlocked. That night, in his private quarters, Leo couldn't sleep. The gauntlet pulsed gently, like a second heartbeat, and when he touched the center rune, it happened. A flood of visions, not dreams. Memories. Not his ancestors. A man in golden armor, standing at the front of a starship fleet. A council of species, listening, respecting, following. And Leo, or the man who came before him, giving a final order before the Great War began. "If we fall, let the stars forget us, until they're ready to remember." Leo gasped awake. He wasn't just the descendant of the ancients. He was one of them. Reborn. Somehow his bloodline carried more than DNA. It carried legacy. And now that legacy had returned, the enemy moves. But elsewhere, something else had also awakened. In the depths of the Wound Nebula, a shape began to stir. Massive, silent, cold, not built. It had grown. A creature that looked like a star, but pulsed like a heart. Around it, millions of smaller vessels orbited, like parasites. Inside the core chamber, a voice whispered, "The flame is lit. The hair returns." Another voice, darker, answered, "Then we end the light, before it becomes fire." The Eaters of Suns had seen the flare. And now, they were coming. Virella's secret. Back on Veyr Prime, Leo stood with Varela on the city's edge. The twin moons rose behind her, casting her in silver light. "Why did you really say yes?" he asked quietly. She didn't answer right away. Then she spoke, "Because I was told the prophecy since I was a child. That one day, the last guardian would return. That he would not remember who he was, but he would carry the fire in his voice, and kindness in his heart." Leo stared at her. "You believed in me, before I believed in myself." She nodded, "Because I knew the question would come, and when it did, I had to answer it." Leo smiled softly. "You said yes, to destiny." "No," she said, "I said yes to you." The message from Earth. Suddenly, a signal crackled through the communication array. "Captain Kane, this is Earth Command. We received your flare." Leo froze. "We don't know how, but something activated old tech beneath Antarctica. A vault opened, marked with symbols no one has seen before. Sir, it has your face carved on it." The message ended. Virella turned to Leo. "Earth remembers now." He nodded. "Then we've only got one thing left to do." She raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" Leo looked to the stars. "We light the rest of the fires. The date that changed the galaxy." He asked her out. She said yes. And together, they lit a fire that reached every corner of the stars. 1 month later, the galaxy was no longer quiet. From the ice fields of Earth to the desert moons of Veyr, ancient signals had come alive. Satellites once dead now blinked with purpose. Vaults under forgotten worlds opened. Ships hidden beneath oceans and volcanoes had risen, glowing with the same white fire that marked Leo Kane's arm. The ancients had returned, but so had the enemy. The Eaters of Suns moved like a virus, silent, fast, unstoppable. They didn't just destroy, they erased. Entire systems were going dark. No signals, no survivors, just cold silence. War was coming, and the galaxy looked to one man, a human, to lead the way. The Alliance of the Broken. In orbit above Veyr Prime, the greatest meeting in galactic history was underway. Not in a palace, not in a war room, but on Leo's ship, the Firelight, a battered freighter upgraded with Veyari tech and now holding leaders from over 20 star systems. Leo stood at the center, wearing light armor and the glowing gauntlet of Terra. Varela stood beside him, calm and regal, her eyes brighter than ever. "Thank you all for coming," Leo said. "I'm not a king. I'm not a prophet. I didn't grow up knowing this war was coming." He paused, looked each of them in the eye. "I just asked a woman to dinner." Nervous chuckles rippled through the room. And that one question woke up an ancient flame. "Now, I ask you all a new one. Will you fight with me?" The room was quiet. Then one by one, they nodded. The battle begins. It started above the lost world of Serathon, where the Eaters had begun feeding on a sun. Leo led the strike fleet, a mix of ancient Terran warships, Veyari stealth cruisers, and repurposed mining vessels turned into war machines. The enemy looked like shadows, but when they moved, stars dimmed. Their ships were alive, built of bone and void, with red eyes that followed every move. Leo's voice echoed through the fleet. "This is not just a battle for planets. This is for memory, for hope, for the right to exist. Light them up. The sky ignited. The firelight's last stand. As fleets clashed in the darkness, Leo and Varela piloted the firelight straight into the enemy swarm. "We're too close," Varela warned. "They'll see us." "That's the point," Leo said. Inside the firelight was the final piece of ancient tech, the flare core, a device built to release a supernova burst of truth light, one powerful enough to burn away the Eater's form and reveal their weakness. But to use it, someone had to stay behind and activate it manually. "I'm going," Leo said. "No, you're not," Varela replied. They stared at each other. Leo tried to smile. "Hey, this was just supposed to be a date." She stepped forward, placed her hand over his. "It still is," she whispered. "The heart of the storm." They flew deep into the enemy's high ship, a floating planet-sized organism filled with twisted echoes of dead stars. Everything inside it was wrong. Time slowed. Gravity shifted. They saw memories not their own. Planets dying. Galaxies crying out. The Eaters didn't hate life. They devoured it because they could not feel it. And now, they feared Leo, because the flame of Terra had returned. He placed the core on the enemy heart. "Ready?" he asked. Varela smiled, calm even now. "Say the words." He took a deep breath. "I asked her out. She said yes. And now, we say yes to all of you." He pressed the core. The light returns. The explosion didn't destroy. It restored. All across the galaxy, shadows vanished. Eaters crumbled like ash. The high ship screamed, then fell silent. In its place, stars reawakened. Ships that had gone dark returned to life. Planets that lived in fear saw sunrise again. The flame had not just burned the enemy, it had healed the galaxy's forgotten truth. The quiet after. Vayar Prime, 1 week later. The firelight returned. Damaged, burned, but flying. Leo and Varela stepped out onto the landing deck, greeted by cheers from dozens of species. No one knew exactly what they had done, but everyone knew the galaxy had changed. A Vayari child stepped forward and offered Leo a flower. "Are you the man who asked the question?" the child asked. Leo smiled. "I guess I am." The final scene. Later that night, on a quiet hill under the twin moons, Leo and Varela sat on a blanket, surrounded by soft lights and alien music. Dinner, finally. Their real date. Leo raised a glass. To the question that started it all. Varela clinked her glass against his. And to every answer that followed. They laughed. The war was over for now, but something stronger had begun. Not just love. Not just legacy. A bond between stars.